I'd fail any of the FANG, the Facebook, Amazon, Netflix interview. I would fail. They wouldn't hire me as a developer. Like, there's no way. I couldn't do a whiteboard interview. I don't, I've never done that sort of exercise practice to get good at it.
Yeah, or programming in front of people. It's a strange experience.
I've done a lot of that.
Yeah, you're more used to that.
But that came later though too. Like I started, when John and I started Egghead, or when I came on to Businessify Egghead, because he had started it before I was in the picture. That was how we bootstrapped it. Was doing workshops and like teaching classes and doing that sort of thing. Though I had done some before, like that, and then that gets into like public speaking. I had a friend that was my friend Jesse Warden, who gave me really good advice when I was first starting out. And I was like, oh, which conferences should I go to? And he's like, Joel, you don't go to conferences, you speak at conferences. And I was like, what? I don't do that. That fills me with panic and makes me want to puke. And it did. Still would. I'm a little out of practice because I stopped doing it. But that's a huge one too. And it's like, I'm not comfortable doing this. I don't like it. It's like it filled me with anxiety, but it's like, there's no way I'm going to get where I need to be as quickly as I need to get there without doing the things that make me like grossly uncomfortable.
So what I really wanted to talk with you about is when you were a Flash developer. Like, and I want to connect all that to Egghead and like how that helps this particular problem. But yeah, I really want to talk about what that was like for you when you were a Flash developer and then that just completely disappeared.
I mean, there's still people doing it.
Yeah, true.
There's still people doing COBOL though.
Well, true.
It's
and
like
actually,
Dillard's department stores.
And I want to get a COBOL programmer and people like that on the show because I feel like
if you can find anybody at Dillard's, they still, like, if you're a front end developer at Dillard's, you still have to do COBOL training, even if you're on like the team that does React. Like everybody has to do like a week of COBOL training.
Yeah, my second job,
because all of their point of sale systems are still
COBOL. That's the same thing. It was my second job. Really old company. They built most of their systems in the 70s. So yeah, people were coming in straight out of college and then learning COBOL to work on those systems. I pushed back pretty hard on that. But on the other hand, like, I don't know, COBOL developers can still make money. I have an uncle, he consults at Ford.
There's nothing wrong with COBOL. You probably make pretty good money at this point, like just because of the scarcity, because, like nobody's going to be like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, I'm going to be a COBOL programmer. Like nobody.
Yeah. That's my uncle. He's like in his 60s and retired, but he still consults because they pay him a lot of money to do COBOL programming at Ford still. Like it exists. So that's one, that is one legitimate path out of this, which is like you could find... legacy systems are around for a really long time in a lot of cases, especially big companies. And
I just read that they were doing, like, they just took the floppy disks out of our, the nuclear, like the Minutemen nuclear facilities recently, or about to stop using like the big floppy disks as the means of control of our, like the launch code style, right? Like they put the big ass floppy disk in there, and that is just now being removed, which makes sense because like I wouldn't be like, I don't want to React front end, for instance, to like control our nuclear arsenal.
I think maybe the Hawaii like nuclear notification system that was a React front end. You heard about that, right?
Oh yeah, where it just starts blaring it out and like
nuclear attack imminent. That seems not great.
It was Node and Mongo.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I have no idea, but something.
But that's true. Legacy apps, so software has been around for a while, but we weren't writing nearly as much software in the 70s as we are now, obviously. So at some point things will tip, and it will be maintaining legacy code bases will be the bulk of jobs. Maybe. I don't know, but there's going to be a point where it's not always building new things. And for most of my career,
I think I'd say we're probably mostly there.
I spend a lot of my time doing that already. Yeah, totally.
Like I don't, I've never seen any statistics. So I'm just making it up, but I would guess that if you start breaking it down, most of it's just people kind of like updating what exists. And like I see it all the time. And I actually, one of my favorite apps is Cloud App. And I love this app, right? Like I take screenshots, it uploads them, it goes ding, and I have the URL in my clipboard. And I love that, right? Like I love this basic functionality, and they update this app all the time. And I'm always like afraid. Like every time I see an update for any app that I use that I love, I'm always afraid when they update it. And I've seen this with Dropbox and Cloud App. Cloud App is still fine, but I'm always like they'll update and they send me an excited email, and I always respond. I like to respond to the emails so the product team gets it, and we'll see that not all of us are out here like just jonesing for new features, because like over time when I have something useful into my workflow, like I get used to it. But I know one, they have, it's like Dropbox has oodles of dollars and a huge, like however big the product team is, like how many thousands of people actually need to work on Dropbox on a daily basis, right? Like
Right.
but they have this infrastructure and they can't let them go because they have these talented teams.
Yes.
So what do? Well, they need to design and they need to develop and they need to enhance our user experience. They need
Yes.
to, like they need to do all these things. And then, I assume they're doing it right. Like they're out there interviewing users, finding their actual problems and pains. But then I open up Paper one morning and I can't find any of my documents, and I can't figure out why. Like, why can't I find any of my documents in Dropbox Paper? Because it's like this subtle design shift that just like is totally disorienting. And I don't, and I still have that problem with Paper, and we've moved to Notion to solve that problem.
Mm-hmm.
And now I use Dropbox as some sort of like dumpster for all of our large files, because we pay for the enterprise plan and get unlimited storage, which I'm like terrified of the lock-in of that too. But like, it's like,
Yes.
the idea that we have to constantly improve software and we have to constantly be moving forward is really a scary one. And I can see like, how that goes back to like being a COBOL programmer. Like this is a system that works. Like it was a good language. It had, like good features for integrity and that sort of thing from my understanding. And it just functions. I don't know COBOL, so I don't know exactly why people would still use it. But, like I came to this realization this year with Egghead is that, wow, we don't have to always push. Like it doesn't have to be new every 6 months. We don't have to be, like launching features. That isn't really the core thing. And I think that's missed a lot. And it has a lot to do with money, because, you build teams, there's this financial incentive, there's a huge amount of cash, like flowing through Silicon Valley and just the software industry in general. And you have to spend it. We tend to spend it on people. People need to have something to do. So what are you going to do? You're going to, software ain't going to write itself. So there we go. Like let's add.
Yeah.
And spin, cotton candy out of moonbeams.
I mean, I think also adding to the problem is the sort of war for talent.
Oh, yeah.
And so Google and Facebook and Amazon and these guys just need to hire developers to almost even just to keep them away from the other guys. And it contributes to the problem where you have more and more developers needing to do stuff, and what are you gonna have them do? It's so strange.
And you have them on sprints, right? Like, so they're on agile sprints. So it's like this 2-week cycle. Like, oh, here's all the stuff we're gonna do next 2 weeks. You got to have stuff to do. What are you gonna do if you have a sprint where you can't do anything? Push forward. Right. It's like I can't have everybody sitting around all confused and sad. We have to have something to do.
Yeah.
And that cycle, it's continuous. It's relentless. I don't know. I don't really have any solution for it. And I mean, have you ever been in a job like in a legacy company, like a big organization? Like I've worked in major airlines, and I would sit there and, working for this major airline, and I learned how to code because I had 6 months where they literally didn't have anything for me to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like but it's like they want me there, but they don't have anything to do. And that one was nice because I was actually like, I didn't have to pretend to work. I could just, I was like, all right, well, is there anything for me to do this week? No. Okay, well, I'm going to study. And they were cool with it. They didn't pay me very much. So, nobody cared.
It was not a big deal to them on the balance sheet.
Yeah. And then other jobs where, it's like you're just in kind of a whatever kind of job, and you sit there on the internet all day and, whatever people do and just kind of pass time because like work has to be done. We have to work.
Right.
Is the idea.
Yeah, I think it also, and I also don't have the solution for this, but it does also contribute to the pushing new technology, new frameworks, new libraries, like the pace at which these things, get shoved out. And not only just the actual software, but processes and how we go about things. And yeah, there are definitely improvements, I would say, but it sometimes it feels like change for the sake of change. It ends up feeling like that when it's, I'm trying to channel a Rails developer, in today's environment. like Rails is still awesome for building web applications,
Sure.
but that's not new and trendy.
Well, and nobody's using Rails at like an enterprise level. It's really very much a prototyping tool and or like a startup tool. Like you're not going to find that I mean IBM probably has a Rails app existing somewhere in its infrastructure, but it's not going to be the go-to, right? Like we're going to use enterprise grade software tools. And I actually get what you're saying. I think the pace of change is way slower than people make it out to be. Like Angular has been around for a decade now. Like 2009 is when Angular came out, and it's changed over time. React was 2012, 2013, and like statistically speaking, I see a lot of statistics just based on our like usage patterns. Like what are people watching and asking for on Egghead? Like that's all people really care about is those two.
Mm-hmm.
All the rest of it kind of follows like way down on the percentage of use. And I get why those exist, and somebody, and like that sentiment, the idea like let's just change this to change it. And I wonder, like the folks at Google, like the burn rate on that project, like Angular's burn rate, like I don't even know what it is, but it has to be big because they pay people really well, and they have a sizable team. React seems a little bit leaner, but still same thing. These are top end, like world class, best in the business kind of engineers working on these problems to make like free software that we can all like use and enjoy. It's really weird. Like it's weird and interesting to me, like at scale psychologically, like why these tools exist and what we're doing and where we're going with all these things is I don't know. It's fun to watch.
Yeah, I agree, and I also agree with you that the pace of change is not as fast as people seem to make it. But I think that if you pay attention to newsletters, if you pay attention to Hacker News and Reddit, so various subreddits that you might read, like then you get the impression that things change, almost weekly. There's something new. There's some new thing.
Oh yeah, I write scary ass emails all the time that make people like feel the terror inside of their soul about the pace of change and the fact that they need to keep up or get left behind. Like that's like I'm guilty of propagating that mindset, I think, in some ways. And because to me, like it boils down to marketing, like a lot of that you talk about in those forums, because I see my words, like I see my marketing copy get expressed as people's opinions later. And I'm small potatoes, right? Like we are this like tiny little drop in the ocean. So it's me like throwing out a little bit of marketing copy, and then you see that kind of broadly spreading. It's like
maybe you're doing your research and you're tapping into something that people are feeling. And so you see it mirrored everywhere. But it is a real problem though. Like it's a real pain. I don't want to say like, oh, these people that are worried about, what they're going to do next.
Oh, no, it's a real feeling. They're valid feelings.
Yeah, it really is. And also it's only a fake problem in the sense that if you could figure out how to carve out what you need to know now, like that question, what should I learn now? What do I need to know now? What should my tech stack be now? If you had that answer, then none of that is a problem, right? Like if you knew what the answer to that question was in your space, in your industry, and whatever you're working on, then that's not a problem. But that question's really hard to answer.
Yeah, that's true. And you can make bad choices. And it's like we talked about my first career, because I started programming. I'm 45 now as we talk, and was 35 when I got my first like entry level job as a programmer. And at the time I couldn't be entry level. That was kind of my thing, because I had 4 kids, and you can't just like change careers and go back and like I can now make half of what I'm making, so I can like scrabble my way up. I had to figure out how to get to like a living wage as quickly as possible, and I chose Adobe Flex at the time, which was great. Like I honestly miss the Flash runtime on a very regular basis. It was a pretty good idea. It was ubiquitous. It kind of took the browsers out of the equation. I miss it on a lot of levels. At the same time, I think it was fine. But what happened to me was I invested a lot of time in like becoming an expert in this space. So in a very short amount of time, within like 3 years, I went from never having coded to being like a senior technical architect and a consultant. And I had 2 books published in the Flash Flex space. And
in 3 years,
yeah, it was really really clicking. I mean, it was planned and methodical, and I worked a lot to do that. Like I was basically working. I don't even know. It was at least 2 jobs. Because I was still working during the day, and then at night I was working on my hustle to get to where I needed to be in terms of my new career. But then Steve Jobs, rest in peace, was Flash is dead. We'll never put it on the iPhone. Go fuck yourself.
The memo. Yeah.
And it wasn't, and like Adobe's like, oh, it's fine. And then in November 2011, Adobe was like, yeah, we can't recommend Flex for enterprise applications anymore. And I was like, because I was doing Amy Hoy's 30 by 500. Like I was in my first rounds of that. I was like, oh, I'm gonna I got this. I know exactly what I'm gonna do. And they announced that, and so like my fate was completely tied to an organization and a platform. A commercial, publicly held company had my entire career like wrapped up inside of their product, and I was like, well, that can't happen again. And I've done a lot since then to kind of diversify. And
what did happen?
Steve made the announcement that Flash would never be on the iPhone, and then
what happened to you?
Oh, I went into like a deep spiral of depression and had to like figure out how to navigate the JavaScript space and what browsers were and what all that was. And at the time, it was like Ember, Backbone, Angular were kind of the three. And I love frameworks. Like I love tools. I love like having a whole set of problems solved for me versus, like I feel like if you're not using a framework, you're writing a framework. And I'm not a person to sit down and write a framework. That's not what I do. I like to I like to keep writing those features and keep the flow of software going. So I love using frameworks. That's how I learned. So it was kind of like, which one do I choose? And then at the same time, I never did JavaScript, though Flash and Flex was ActionScript 3, which was, if you don't know, there was a ECMAScript 3.
Yeah, I know. Yep.
ECMAScript 4 was ActionScript 3, and there was a rift. That's why, like, if you look at ECMAScript, and JavaScript skips from ECMAScript 3 to ECMAScript 5, and it's because of a fun rift in Macromedia and then Adobe and the rest of the space and standards. And it was like that was ECMAScript 4 had classes and inheritance and all that fun stuff that we didn't see in JavaScript until ECMAScript 5 with a totally different implementation. So we kind of regressed and then progressed, I guess, in some ways. But I was like, oh, what am I going to do? And then I just, like at the end of the day, I was like, oh, I'm just going to do Angular and went with that. And like work was like, you want to do another Flex project or you want to get on this Angular JS project? And I was like, I've never done that before. And they said, well, you'll figure it out. So.
But I know you, man. Like I know you didn't just randomly choose Angular.
No, I did I did a lot of research and started writing basically like kind of my experience using the different ones. I think Backbone's the only one that's kind of, because Ember still exists. Like as long as Yehuda Katz is writing software, I think we'll still have Ember because him and it's very loyal fan base because it's good kit, right? Like that's what's interesting to me is that they're all great. Totally. Backbone was great, and like the patterns I think are something that we've got away from, but it was still good kit at the time. Angular is great, React is great, Vue is great, Ember is great. It really depends on your team more than anything. So I took the JavaScript gig after doing Angular. I had a really good team, so they helped me support me. And as it turns out, like the fundamentals of writing good code, like the idea of whether it's clean code or design patterns or patterns of enterprise application architecture or working effectively with legacy code, those are all some of my kind of formative books. Like those patterns and ideas, they come from like way back. Like you can read a Unix programming book from the early 80s. There's a really good one. I think it's just called the Unix Programming Environment. But like you can read that and it's still valid on your Mac. And there's these fundamental principles that carry through all of them. And we get this constant need to rename these design patterns. And I think that's a marketing tactic in general. Like people want to get a name for themselves. So how do you do that? Well, I take some old stuff, I'll remix it a little bit and I call it something new. And now everybody's like, I got to learn this new thing. And if you like peel it back and you kind of squint at it, it's actually like the same patterns and the same kind of things that we're doing. Software's super young too. So it's like like in terms of technology, we don't know shit in terms of developing software. And one of my favorite quotes is the one thing I know about my opinions is that they're eventually going to be proven wrong. Like all of my opinions around software aren't correct. There is no best practice. There's the okayest practice that we have right now. And you just have to pick something. At the end of the day, like that's what, like making the decision, just like when we did Egghead, when we started that, I was like, oh, should I use Django? Should I use Rails? Like, what should I do? And my friends were like, yeah, just use Rails. Like, quit asking this question because, like all of us use Rails. So why don't you just use it too? I was like, yeah, my peers do use Rails. So I'll use it too. And it turned out fine. It would have turned out fine either way, I think, at the end of the day. But
yeah, sure. There would have been drawbacks to whatever approach you went for.
And it was the reason I was able to go from in like the course of 3 years from, like not coding to like publishing multiple books was one, I learned in public. I published everything that, like, when I would have a problem or I was learning something, I would take notes and then I would write a blog post. Here was my problem. Here's how I solved it. Here was my problem. Here's how I solved it. And I would try to like figure out what are the fundamentals, what are the truths across all of these different, different frameworks and tools that we're using. And there really is. There's like how do you, like how do you work with people? That's I don't think underrated at all. I think it's probably underutilized, but it's more important in a lot of aspects to me than the actual how do you build software. But then there's a bunch that's missing too. Like I don't think we teach like taxonomies. They always, the joke is naming things is hard, right? Like it's one of the hardest things in software is naming things. But then I also never see anybody talk about taxonomy or how do we name things or how are things actually organized. So we pay a lot of lip service to how hard it is, but then don't actually spend a lot of time in our education learning how to actually handle that.
Yeah. So naming things is hard, but what's the cost of not naming something perfectly?
It's millions of dollars.
It could be, or it could be nothing. There's loads of code bases that I've looked at where it's like, what is the, I don't, lots of poor choices. But
I sit and stare at mine, and I have because this was my Egghead was my first Rails app. So I live with a lot of like week 2 decisions where I was literally doing a Rails tutorial that was like build a Rails app with Stripe and Devise. Devise is a authentication mechanism for Rails. And that tutorial code still is like the fundamental backbone of our entire business. And then, like my little projects, or I'd hire somebody and be like, hey, build this. And, people are like, yeah, sure, I'll build that. So I have all these like things and weird names and over specified. And like the cost of that is actually truly significant in probably like locked up potential of what a more efficient system could bring and in how fast we can deliver things. So I think there's, it's like really true costs to those kind of problems too, but it's impossible to measure, right?
I could geek out about this with you, easily. And I have many thoughts, which I would like to say, but I really want to get back to your story, which is, and I think that's going to be super interesting to people that are listening, because this is, you first of all launched a career as a, from zero to essentially experienced developer in 3 years. And then that disappeared essentially. And then you turned it into a sweet gig where you were doing Angular programming, where I'm assuming that company knew that you weren't super experienced in Angular at that point. Is that true?
Yeah. And, it's like when I think the word like senior and junior in software is weird anyway.
Mm-hmm.
My experience and like at that point, I'd done a lot of work previously. I've managed teams and I've done like been adjacent to software development. So when you say something like senior technical architect, like I have a good brain for systems, how things fit together. And at the end of the day, like you could throw me in a COBOL application or whatever, and I could bring value at hey, let's organize this.
Right. So please teach me, how did you take these overarching soft skills that you have, which are super valuable, and then connect them to a job, connect it to a totally new career in Flash? Like, I'm super interested in that.
Well, at the end of the day, it's like the ability to communicate. And I was communicating, via my websites and like social networks and out there helping people and like in IRC channels or GitHub issues. And
so let's take a specific example, like the first job you got with John doing Angular. How did that happen? Like, tell me the story of how you got that job and like how they thought you were the guy for that job.
I was working at a consultancy, which is no longer with us anymore. They had some management issues and sadly like lost the business. But I was working at a consultancy and the job was there, and it's just like I am pretty consistent. I deliver. I tell people, like I'm very forthright sometimes to a fault, maybe in meetings and in the software development process. I just don't take a lot of bullshit, and like that sort of consistency is needed on most software projects. And I think that was why they would like offered me the gig. And it was just like my previous project was up. There was a new project that looked pretty good for me, and I was in a really good environment where I had a lot of trust, right? Like that when they said, hey, you want this gig, and I was like, hey, I don't have a whole lot of experience doing that specific technology, and they're like, well, that isn't what we're asking. Do you want to like have a go at it? Because they trusted me because of my track record, and then like a consistency in terms of being able to actually deliver and get things done, like take things that last 10%, right? Like we were able to finish, and that can be hard. Starting's easy.
So you shipped, right?
Yeah.
You had the skill of shipping, which frankly is something That's pretty rare. So you're good at getting things done, getting it out the door. And then you were in an environment where the people that ended up offering you the job, they already knew that.
Yeah.
So they already
Yeah.
knew that about you. And they knew that about you because they were clients of the consultancy you were working at?
No, the consultancy is what did it. The client didn't have any like choice. Like they weren't able to like name people. So like the consultancy, like you're going to be the technical architect for this, and this is the people that we delivered. And I had, like my team had a lot of experience, so like they were able, like I was able to lean on them as well, right? Like they wanted, I'm the interface, because I speak like the business to nerd translation, I guess, is one of my things that I do.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm able to kind of intermediate and talk about the holistic aspects of creating software, and like shield my team from having to deal with that or having to deal like with the client and as a very direct thing, right? Like I would be the person that was the direct interface, and then I would take the business needs and translate that to like the software that we would produce,
Mm-hmm.
And iterate it on over time. So like that's like when you say, do people even use the term technical architect anymore? I feel like that's kind of maybe gone out of style. But
I don't know. I mean, I think there are still like architect level positions, especially in enterprise, but
it's a technical project manager job,
right?
Where you code sometimes too, and write tools and automation and like do opsy kind of stuff for your team and make sure that their needs are taken care of. So it didn't require that I was like a low level, browser API expert or anything of that nature. I just needed to like understand it, and then also be willing to like study and learn, which I'm able to do.
Right.
And so like, and I started doing that, and I just go back to my mode. If I'm learning something, I might as well like write about it, because like nothing in my career to date in software has been more fruitful than learning something and then writing about it over and over and over again. Just repeat that cycle, and every time I do that, it seems to, like, I have a catalog now, which is nice. So I'm 10 years in at this point, and have a like a catalog, a body of work. I never have to prove myself. I haven't had a resume in years. It's a really nice privilege that I live in to be able to do that. But then, that's backed by a lot of work and visible evidence of my ability to communicate and do things.
So you say that that's helped you, but like, can you think of a specific example? Like, connect the dots. I wrote this thing, they read this thing.
So when I interviewed at that consultancy, in my interview, I was like, "Hey, how's it going? It's going great. Can we just talk about some of your blog posts for a little while?" That was my interview. So that was, like, that's probably one of the brightest and most significant points in terms of, like that's a direct dot connected for sure, because the fact that I had written these things and they were relevant to the needs of their company and their clients and what they needed to hire for. They didn't have to ask me or look at a resume. They could just, kind of go and read what I'd written and kind of follow me that way. And, but pre-resume, know that one, I was able to communicate, and then two, it's demonstrating understanding too. So
yeah, I mean, how did you end up getting the interview? That's another interesting question. Like, do you remember?
Yeah, it was Twitter. My homie Ben Klinkenbeard, who's still a friend and egghead instructor, is one of our first egghead instructors too. He recommended me for the job. He got a $3,000 hiring bonus, like a referral bonus for it too. So like he was pretty stoked about that. But yeah, so it was just, like one of my Twitter friends was like, "Hey, here's this person, here's their blog, like check it out. They're doing what we need to hire for." And that's how I ended up there. Twitter's been a huge part of my career.
Right. So were the blog posts that you talked about, were they side projects or like based on side projects, or was it from work that you'd been doing for another company?
Yeah, I had so my partner had a photography business, and I built her a kind of like a management system for her photos and her clients, and a presentation system, which was Django backed and had a Flash Flex front end. So that gave me like a lot of practical experience. And I took a mirror of that app and built it. The job I had right before I became a full-time software developer, I convinced them that I could build, they hired a consultant and it didn't work out. And I was like, "I think I could build that for you." And they were like, "Oh yeah?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they let me. So I had these two kind of running actual real projects that I got to put up that weren't overly demanding, but then gave me a lot of like practical experience in terms of building things. So not so much side projects, I guess they are, but like they were important and they were part of like a full-time thing for me. But that was definitely on the way to go in terms of learning. And I also, at the time, spent a lot of time in IRC, and I would just be answering questions, and I would end up with small like freelance gigs from doing that, just being a person that answers questions and tries to be helpful. Eventually you'll get, hey, can we just hire you? And that worked a lot and was able to give me kind of that real experience. I do really well, when I'm like contractually obligated to deliver. I'll try to, like make sure I meet those obligations and that sort of thing. So that's always helped me as well. I don't know if that's as viable anymore, or how like freelancing
IRC or side projects.
Yeah, like, well, just like that sort of. I guess you can still do that. Just like it's probably more like Slack rooms and stuff these days. Like hanging out in like React to Flux or wherever that people hang out.
Yeah, that's
chat about software and do like community support basically. If you're really helpful and you're in there, like, and I would do it. And Stack Overflow finally came around. Like I learned to code without Stack Overflow, and then it came around, and like I still have a ton of Stack Overflow points because I spent so much time on there. Just like, and it would be like somebody would ask a question, and I would literally go do the research for them and come up with the answers and try to like take their question and provide a really solid, like useful, helpful answer. And then often would take that and turn that into a blog post and try to, which it occurs to me that's like doing marketing research in a lot of ways. It's like finding pain and then solving that pain for folks is a very consistent way to market your skills and talents and get people to trade you dollars for your knowledge and time and effort.
Well, I mean, you created a lot of different luck surface areas for yourself.
Yeah.
You had all these one-on-one connections you were making with people via IRC or Slack channels nowadays, and Twitter friends that you were making. You're doing Stack Overflow questions, which means, like you said, you're essentially doing market research. So you're writing about problems that people have. And then a few of these things coalesce out of the blue, seemingly, like looks like luck, but really you kind of set yourself up for a friend, knows that you write about these things. The company is having those problems. You go to the interview, you talk about those problems with them, then you have the job.
I'd fail any of the FANG, the Facebook, Amazon, Netflix interview. I would fail. They wouldn't hire me as a developer. Like, there's no way. I couldn't do a whiteboard interview. I don't, like I've never done that sort of exercise practice to get good at it.
Yeah, or programming in front of people. It's a strange experience.
I've done a lot of that.
Yeah, you're more used to that.
But that came later though too. Like I started, like when John and I started Egghead, or when I came on to businessify Egghead, because he had started it before I was in the picture. That was how we bootstrapped it. Was doing workshops and like teaching classes and doing that sort of thing. Though I'd done some before, like that, and then that gets into like public speaking. I had a friend that was my friend Jesse Warden, who gave me really good advice when I was first starting out. I was like, oh, which conferences should I go to? And he's like, Joel, you don't go to conferences, you speak at conferences. And I was like, what? I don't do that. That fills me with panic and makes me want to puke. And it did. Still would. I'm a little out of practice because I stopped doing it. But that's a huge one too. And it's like, I'm not comfortable doing this. I don't like it. It's like it filled me with anxiety, but it's like, there's no way I'm going to get where I need to be as quickly as I need to get there without doing the things that make me like grossly uncomfortable. So like, there's a huge amount of luck. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, there's like, I think, luck is always playing, but I feel also that like you can tee up, you can tee yourself up to be more lucky. I think is something that is possible, and not, like, not that you're necessarily going to hit the jackpot, but you can kind of design and like craft and do the work to, when luck presents itself, you're ready to accept the opportunity, because sometimes you can be lucky and it's just not the, like that opportunity might pass you by.
Yeah. Well, and then all of this was happening while you still, but prior to getting the consulting gig, which is what kind of moved you into the Angular world and ultimately Egghead, mm-hmm. you did have a job still. Like you'd done all this before, but for Flash. So now you were sort of rebooting yourself. Presumably you were still doing Flash work or something like that.
No, I stopped that cold. Like it was just dead to me. Like, if it was dead, it was dead. There's no point. And right. Like ultimately I look back at that, I'm like, oh, well, that was a really good thing. And I'm glad that Adobe made that decision at the time, because, it's like let's just like peel the duct tape off the wound. Mm-hmm. And like it hurts really bad, but now is the time to start recovery from that process. So that was, like that at the end of the day worked out really well. But at the time it was really, really, really difficult to like put that much effort into something and then just have the rug like completely pulled out from under you.
That's brutal. I mean, that's absolutely brutal. I feel like a lot of people are going through that now, even still with like jQuery, and especially like people who are more web designers doing like the HTML, CSS, jQuery thing. I mean, mm-hmm. I honestly feel like there's still a huge chunk of people that's what they've been doing for the last 10, 15 years. Mm-hmm. And then they're still doing it at their job, because a lot of companies, it's like, why would we don't need to do anything different right now. We still have that. But at the same time, it's a little sketchy, because then if you needed to go do something else at another company, they've got totally different, nobody's hiring like the sort of middle ground jQuery, HTML, CSS, web designer, specialist anymore. Not specialist, but more like generalist anymore. Now it's like front end specialist. You're more like a front end engineer, and then we need designers on the back end. So it's like, it's a similar problem, except for it feels like jQuery and that sort of approach to building web apps is sort of whimpering out. It's not just like Flash is dead.
I would not start a new project with jQuery.
Nobody would, and that would make no sense. You should not do that.
So HTML and CSS to me is in a better place than it has ever been. And like you see, and I agree with you largely. It's like you're going to be a UX specialist, you're going to be an accessibility specialist, or have those kind of skills. Like if you're a front end designer, like you have to kind of spread that out and like it's design is part of the job, but like who are we designing for, and how does this affect user experience? And to me, it's like user experience is not visual design completely. That's part of it, but it's like this, it's this big field, and those kind of jobs and those kind of titles. That's why we see these like new titles too, right? Like I think we're reframing. It's new names for patterns that already exist, but that people are just trying to be specific and kind of indicate specialties and that sort of thing. It is hard. Like if you like HTML and CSS is a really hard sell, right? Like if you want to get paid what you're worth, and like I have a lot of respect for people that do that work. Like it's hard, like to make things lay out and work properly is one of the most challenging things for me personally. Like I can like do back end stuff and write JS all day long, like reams of that stuff, but like I really struggle with the visual aspects of it. So, but at the same time, like when organizations are looking for stuff, they want people with, if not full stack, some larger slice of the thing.
Yeah, totally. So do you see that in Egghead and the courses that you offer and what people are interested in?
I mean, everybody wants to learn. It's React, right? Like if I'm suggesting what you should learn right now, I would say primarily learn React, like make that your special thing, and then pick something like Vue or Svelte or some other kind of low volume, low frequency tool that's really good to kind of like also sink into and join at a community level. Because React is like, it would be interesting to know the number of Medium articles produced per day on React, and it's intense, and you see that a lot, and that's part of the pain, right? And that's part of what Egghead is where we curate because of that, because of the noise out there. It's like, how do you curate and give people like those are not all high quality articles that are going up on Medium every day that discuss React, and there's wrong ideas and like things that are weird, and people are all kind of trying to do the thing that I describe, where you write blog. Well, I need to write blog articles, so I'm going to write a bunch of them. And I think one of the things I didn't mention is that I always try to write really quality, as correct as possible, useful blogs and articles in my space, and still do. And that I think that's important. Like quality over quantity is important. But curation is going to be, and it always has been, and will continue to be really important. And especially as like the internet being what it is, like this information fire hose, where we're all just getting blasted in the face on a daily basis with the new. Like you have to be able to how do you filter that noise, and trusted curators at the end of the day is part of that. And I think that's something that we can all participate in. You don't have to have permission to curate. You don't have permission to it's like people love those newsletters, like a JavaScript Weekly or whatever, where you get the best of the web, right? Like people love that because, hey, I can turn off some of my need to consume all this data and go with a trusted source to where I know I'll get at least a good portion of manageable resources that I can look at, even if I'm just reading the titles to kind of see what's going and where the tides are shifting. It's confusing. It's really weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the pace at which content is produced these days is mind-boggling. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, there's no telling how many people are clickety clacking right now at their keyboards, dropping some thought pieces on us.
So tell me more about Egghead, what that is, where it fits into this picture, because I really do feel like Egghead, other courses, other platforms like this, but Egghead I like a lot in particular, but I feel like they fit into this as part of the solution, at least, to this overwhelm that we all face with all of this new stuff. What should I learn? How do I learn it? Where do I go? I think Egghead does some curating. Can you talk a little more about that?
I feel like it's like an extension of that idea that I was talking about. And when we first started, it was just John and I, and John was making really cool Angular videos. He had 50 of them. And I was like, man, I can sell these. And he didn't believe me at first. But I'm persistent. I'll keep at you, because it to me, like the idea of curation and the idea of, I'm solving a problem. It doesn't matter if somebody's already written on this or recorded videos. We still have a voice, and we can bring it down and kind of like be a filter. And Egghead is a filter. And like we specifically target like intermediate to advanced developers. Like John and I basically built a video tutorial site for people that hate video tutorials and are well established in their career. Like if you're trying to learn JavaScript, Egghead is not a great starting point. There's stuff on there, but we don't, it's like you really kind of need to know what you're doing to get into it. And there's not a lot of that. I think most people really try to like the funnel, the entry funnel is much bigger for people just trying to start out. And that's where you see, like there's boot camps. That's a, like multi-billion-dollar business every year, because they're trying to capture that entry level funnel. And you see that on a lot of sites, and we're really not. And it limits our market to some respect. And at some point we'll probably fix that. But what we try to do is take working professionals, not people that are necessarily professional trainers, and kind of get and extract their experience and condense it in a way that respects the viewer's time. Because I like to read because it's fast. And lately I've been more in tune with videos, because I'll turn closed captions on and put it at 2x, and then it's more something that I can deal with. But like real time video, and then, hey, welcome to my channel. On this episode, we're going to discover the intricacies of AngularJS. And then at the end, it's like, hey, and then you'll watch the next video and it has the same exact bumpers. It's like, there's like how many minutes of my day that I just lose when I just want to solve this one problem. And you see that all over the place, and we don't like that. So we decided to build a site that would cater to a different market, people that just want to get information hard and fast. And it's interesting, because now we're actually like, well, we could also like have some kind of slower, less intense, less compressed. We're very compressed. Like a 2-minute Egghead video is not something that you get to spend 2 minutes with and you're just done with it. It's a compression algorithm, effectively, where you kind of like, if it's a 30-minute course, this is really hours of actual work where you're trying to understand and follow along and do that sort of thing.
I agree. I almost always have to rewatch half the videos a couple times to sort of redigest it.
My suggestion is to like just watch it, like watch the entire thing, flat out, just watch everything all the way once through, and then like go back and just plan on watching it twice. At a minimum. And but it suits me. It's how I read books too. Like I fly through them, and then we'll go back and come back with my highlighter after the fact, after I've gone through once.
Yeah. The Egghead approach reminds me of there's this book, JavaScript, The Good Parts, which everybody knows that book. If you're a JavaScript developer, it's Doug Crockford's book. It's sort of notorious and infamous, and some people love it, some people hate it. I'm in the love camp. I love that book. That's how I learned JavaScript.
Me too.
But that was that book was, I mean, you had to be a programmer first, I think, before you jumped into that book. So it's like Egghead, and that, it assumes you're a programmer, and this is not going to.
It's like that thick.
And yeah, exactly. The book is like half an inch thick.
Like a quarter inch thick. Yeah, it's even thinner than that. Yeah.
Yeah, at most. And yet, I mean, it was weeks of reading that book on the train over and over again and over and over and over again. I'm just reading this, you'd read it, you'd be like, whoa, that's amazing. And then your brain would be like, I did not fully comprehend that yet. And I just had to keep reading chapters over and over and over again, really focus and think really hard. But so that was a lot of work, but it was all in one book. It was super curated. It was like exactly, here's what you need to know about JavaScript. And it made me love JavaScript versus the first time I looked at JavaScript, I was like, this is terrible. Like, what choices have we made here? I don't understand this. But then when a smart, professional, experienced person curated it for me, made it super concise, and then I had to really dig into it to understand it. That also, I think that process of being forced to dig into it really cemented the knowledge in my mind. And that, like, I knew JavaScript. Like, after I had gone through that process, I felt really confident about, what I needed to do. Those things were at my fingertips versus just like a tutorial of like, how to do this without, I don't know. It's like, it was just the right amount of detail and depth, because you could go super focused on one solution or one pattern, and it was just enough because he picked such a few number of topics. He could really make you like focus on it. Anyway, I think Egghead is exactly like that. I love Egghead courses. I use them to catch up on stuff whenever I need to get up to speed on something new. Like I had to do MobX thing recently, I'm like, oh, okay. So I watched Dave's course on MobX and it was great. I'm like, this is perfect.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's the idea too, right? Like with Crockford's book, I read it too when I was trying to switch to JavaScript, and I was like, well, here's somebody I would pay extra for thinner books.
Yeah, hell yeah.
I know publishers like to like have the plump books, but like the definitive guide, the JavaScript book is like 3 inches thick.
The Rhino book, yeah, it's
yeah,
insane.
compared to the good parts, which is a 1/4 inch thick. And then like if you don't know JS, which can anybody ever know JS? Kyle says no. That's really thick too, but it's like that's the next level, right? Like after I've read the good parts and I feel comfortable and able to work and get shit done and like make money and like put food on the table, like then I'm into Kyle's book and I want to know all the nuances, and I love you don't know JavaScript for that, and other books like Eloquent JavaScript, which are kind of opinionated theory books, where Crockford was like, here is the subset of JavaScript to where you can get to work right now. Like you can go to work tomorrow and feel confident if you like understand this, what I've placed out in this book, then you can get started.
Here's how closures work. Here's how you can use them in these patterns. Here's how you can represent data on a page. Like, oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and it really worked for me too. And like I love, there's so many books out there that are like, well, this would be a really good article. They probably should have been edited down to. But yeah, I learned that there's a certain width of book that you have to have so you can even print on the spine, and that's driven book length for a long time.
Really?
Yeah, like if you're putting it on the shelf, like you can't, like what sort of font size would even be legible, and then you get to the like you're almost like I love zines.
Yeah,
I don't know if you've seen zines, but they're
yeah.
usually like 12 pages to maybe 50 pages at the larger size, stapled in the center, and they fold, but they don't have a spine. And at that width, you wouldn't be able to really even bind it and put a spine on there. Like it would be physically impossible. And I think like binding over the years, like if you go back to like whenever we first started binding books, those had to be real thick because they're using glue and doing all that stuff. And like modern machines are probably able to make it smaller, but you're still limited to a certain width. It's about 120 pages, I think.
Have you, speak of zines, do you know Ted Nelson's Computer Lib? That was from like the 70s, I think is when he wrote it, when zines were as a format super popular, I think. But that's a Ted Nelson, Xanadu. Anyway, this is something totally off topic. I just bought a copy, one of the originals, because it's
nice.
like one of this super cool sort of artifact of web technology. He invented the concept of mark like HTML, basically.
Oh, okay.
And it's outlined in this book, and the book is classic. But yeah, he had all kinds of problems getting it printed because it's like this. It's super thin. It has text that it reads front to back and then back to front. So it's not just
nice.
Yeah, and it's like 4 columns and like little pictures sort of inserted everywhere. It's absolutely crazy. But yeah, there's like very few printers are going to be able to handle something like that.
Yeah. We've been and that's the fun part of, and then like why I love them is the notion of a zine is that you just need a photocopier, and like you can print it, and then they exist. You don't need anybody's permission. Nobody has to say yes. I say that a lot to people because I get a lot of requests to publish on Egghead, and we're like I said, we're a curation site, and we have a tiny team and like focus very, very strongly on quality over quantity. So I'm like, I constantly have to tell people no, and I'm like, you do not have to ask my permission. Like there's nothing about this that, and people will often come to me and they haven't made a screencast, or they haven't done anything, like they haven't done like any prerequisite work to like demonstrate. And we deal with a lot of folks that are in that stage, but at the same time, I'm like, look, you can publish and you do not have to ask permission. Like the internet, like you don't have to get, like here's all the materials, here's how we do it. Here's we have howtoegghead.com, where we lay out the entire process and kind of our philosophy about making videos. Please use that, like, and create something. And we'd love to see it. I want to see it, but it's like, I think the zine culture and the internet in general, and like having a personal space where you can publish and it's your house, it's your platform. You don't need my permission or anybody, Medium's permission or anybody's permission to get out there and create a space and run it under your name and publish and put yourself out there and like if you're not comfortable with it, like I understand that too, but at the same time, I think pushing the comfort boundaries is something that's like, for me anyway, has really accelerated my career and allowed me to do a lot of things I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. Sometimes feeling like you're going to puke on your shoes is just the way you have to move forward and get past it. And then, you know, like every time I've done that, every time I pushed past it, the next time felt a little less like I was going to, you know, like I was going to retch on my shoes. And then that's, you know, like depending on what you're doing, like public speaking, that's really hard.
Public speaking's, I think, probably universal fear almost. You know, it's like one of those things you do get used to it if you do it a few times. But like you said, even if you stop for a while, you kind of have to ramp up to getting used to it again.
I think there's at a genetic level.
Yeah.
Like the fear response and the triggers in terms of like getting out there and doing that to yourself.
It's intense.
But it's a muscle too. And, you know, it's like, it's actual, it's like chemically in our brains, right?
Mm-hmm.
This isn't like some deficiency in us. It's just that our brains are like, no, run. Seriously, run. Do I need to make you puke right now? Because I will. Run.
Whatever is happening right now, it's not good.
Yeah.
Leave.
And, you know, when I did it the first time, like it was just like, talk slower, take drinks. It's fine. Like you can pause and take a drink, and the audience wants you to succeed. And that's proven true over and over and over and over again to me, is that the audience wants you to succeed. People want to, you know, it's like the internet's full of trolls, and there's a few of these loud, you know, effers that are out there and will try to make you feel bad. But for the most part, everybody wants you to succeed. Everybody wants to kind of mutually like lift each other up. And that is the majority. And hopefully the majority of the community we can surround ourselves with, instead of the other side of the coin, where you get kind of the sad parts of the internet. And I've had to deal with that. And I know a lot of people deal with that on a huge scale, more than I do. And that makes it even more challenging to put yourself out there. But, you know.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. There's something about the nature of the internet and the way we have things set up now that sort of bubbles up the worst of us. But speaking, that's definitely way less of a problem. And you're right. Yeah. And also you can ramp your way up. You know, you could do meetups and start with a small group and kind of get used to that. Although I used to be more terrified of speaking to smaller groups than larger groups, which is weird.
Yeah, I could always do workshops. I don't get any sort of nerves from like teaching in a classroom setting, but speaking in front of 10 people, like doing a prepared slide-driven speech, like would terrify me. And I don't. It's the same thing at the end of the day, really, fundamentally. But it's just weird. I also think so. We've been doing a lot of like remote video stuff, right? Like whether it's Twitch or Zoom or just like pre-recorded stuff where you're giving a presentation and just kind of, you know, it's almost like practice, and you can get in and you can do these things and you put on YouTube or Vimeo or wherever and just like talk and teach. And if nobody watches it, fine, you've done it, you've practiced, but then you might help somebody too. So like, I think that's another way to approach this stuff.
All right, man. So I want to respect your time. I think we need to kind of wrap up, but is there anything else you wanted to add? Anything about Egghead? Anything about your journey? Any pieces of advice for people?
I'm still a big fan of books. I think people should read more books. I think people are on the internet looking for shortcuts a lot, and they're looking for articles and tutorials. And I think books are foundational, and there's so much thought. And if you like get past the current trends and kind of look into the classics and kind of my favorite line of study is kind of how we think and motivation and like habit building, and not really productivity so much, just in terms of, but more in terms of what drives people and how do we get there. And that applies to so much of what we do, whether you're a developer, a designer, or like a product owner or a CEO or whatever. Like what motivates, why are people doing anything at all? I think is an interesting line of study and often proves super valuable to me. So I would definitely recommend that.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Joel. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks, John.
You were awesome.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it.